Okay, first of all, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks very much for taking the time out to attend this webinar, which is an introduction to Infor ION. So basically what I'd like to do is quickly go through the agenda and the points that we're planning to cover this afternoon. Initially, I just want to introduce myself and the other people that are on this call from Eclipse. We'll then have a look at the Infor ION and particularly the background and the context to the development of that particular solution by Infor. We'll then take a look at the suite and the components that make up the Infor ION suite. And then we'll have a brief overview demonstration of some of those components. Now, just to put this into context, the Infor ION suite comprises quite a lot of different component modules, and what we're going to be doing, this will be the first in a series of separate webinars, and in the subsequent webinars what we'll do is drill down on the different components and spend a little more time on those particular solutions. Once we've gone through that, we'll then do a question and answer session. However, if while we're going through the presentation you have any questions at all, there is an option on the GoToWebinar screen where you can basically raise a hand, and if you raise a hand and ask a question, Emma, one of my colleagues, will see that and she'll be able to pass that information over to myself and Richard. So basically I'm going to be doing the slide presentation covering Infor ION. Richard will join in the presentation a little bit towards the end of my presentation, and then he'll do the actual demonstration. If you've got any queries, as I said, if you raise your hand to Emma, she'll be able to help you. So basically this is the first in a series of webinars where we're going to look at the ION suite, and really our objective is to explain the background to how that and why that suite was developed and how it can be used to improve processes, not just in the Sun Systems area but across the organization as a whole. Before we get into the detail of the ION suite, I just wanted to confirm a few of the terms that are going to be used. If you ever go onto our website and download the Infor ION information, which has been developed by Infor, the actual collateral, there's a lot of things that they talk about. So first of all, ION, what does it stand for? So it stands for the Intelligent Open Network. They talk a lot about middleware. So again, I'm sure some of you know or are familiar with that, but for those of you that aren't, middleware, in a very small definition, is software that can connect two or more different software applications in order that they can exchange data. And there are quite a lot of middleware applications out there in the market today. XML. If you are currently using systems that are currently exchanging data, quite often they will be using XML, which is a particular file format that can be exchanged between different software applications. Now, it may be that you wouldn't even know that it was using that, but that's a common standard for exchanging information between software applications. A point solution is a specific piece of software that's been designed to manage a very specific functional or business need. Monolithic solutions, when we talk about them, I guess we're really talking about some of the big ERP solutions where it could be something like an SAP or an Oracle where they've got modules for absolutely every function within an organization that you could think of. They're very, very tightly integrated, but maybe they're not specific, that they haven't got the functionality that a point solution would have. And then the last three, when we talk about ION and integration, we're talking about cloud we're talking about on-premise, and we're talking about hosted solutions. And ION would work with a combination of all of those three. And they're not the only three types of deployments that you can have. There are mixes within those three as well. So you could have a hosted or a cloud or an on-premise type solution where you've got your own private cloud. Okay. So just going back with a little bit of history, and again, this is how Infor present this solution. So if you go back to the 1980s, there were a lot of what's called point solutions out there in the market, where quite often small software development companies developed a very specific piece of software to do a very specific job. So it could be an expense management system, it could be a fixed asset register or a fixed asset management solution. And there were lots of these different solutions around, and generally they were often developed in different programming tools. They could integrate with an organization's existing finance system, but generally that would, to actually do the integration, it would require IT or development resources to put together the integration. And if that finance system was upgraded, then potentially there was a whole lot of new work that needed to be done to fix broken integrations. So very functional solutions, point solutions that could do a specific job, but quite often they were very difficult to integrate into other systems, or if once they were integrated, if one of those other systems were upgraded and changed, it was quite difficult to reintegrate them. You then, in the mid-90s, got the big organizations like the Oracles and the SAPs that had complete suites of applications, but quite often the functionality within those applications was pretty generic, and it didn't really have, each module didn't really have the same level of functionality that a very specific point system would have. Now, as we go along into the internet era, things have changed a little bit, and if we look at these slides, so there's a description of the characteristics of each of these eras. But when you look at the internet era, quite often organizations are using a combination of point solutions, some of these big ERP solutions, in-house hosted solutions. And really what organizations like is that they really want out-of-the-box solutions that can be easily integrated. So an example of that, one of the most popular CRM systems out there is Salesforce, which is a cloud-based solution. And organizations really want to have easy integration between those cloud-type solutions and their standard on-premise solutions or some of these big ERP systems. There's been quite a lot of standardization in this internet era with regards to architecture and technology, and XML, I guess, is one of those standards where it makes life a little bit easier to integrate and exchange data between those different applications. However, quite a lot of the systems, the older systems out there, haven't really caught up with that. And I think as some of the big organizations, if you look at Infor, they are a $2.5–3 billion turnover company, and Sun Systems, as an example, just forms one part of the application suite that they have. Now, as time's gone on, they've acquired more companies in different industry sectors. So, for instance, there's an expense management module, there's BI type tools. So they've got a whole suite of applications, but they're all under the Infor flag, and they needed to find a way of integrating those in a standard way. And I think this is really where the Infor ION application has come from. So if we take a look at this example, we have Infor the ION solution sitting in the middle of a whole bunch of different applications. So we could have cloud solutions, the example being something like Salesforce. We could have on-premise solutions, so that could be Sun Systems, and we could have other things regarding collaboration. So maybe a lot of you use Facebook or you use Twitter. So what ION will do is it will allow information to be exchanged between all of these different applications, either at a file level. So, an example could be on the cloud. I'm using Salesforce for my sales management. I have a lead. That lead is not a customer at the moment, but eventually I sell to that lead and they become a customer. So one of the examples that ION could help with is, as a lead changes its status in Salesforce from a lead to a customer, that ION could pick up that information and actually pass it directly into Sun Systems and create an account, a new client account automatically. So that's one level, i.e. passing a package of information to create a new record in Sun Systems. What it could also do, though, it may be that you wouldn't want that particular piece of information to be dynamically created in Sun. Maybe you'd want it to come out of that cloud application, and if it's a new account being created, maybe it needs to go through to someone in the finance department and say, okay, there's this new account, let's say it's Eclipse, is going to be created. Do you want me to create that in Sun Systems or not? So what ION can do is it can put alerts and it can put workflow to manage different aspects of how information is updated and passed. Now, once that information is in Sun, so let's say we've gone from a lead to creating a customer, that customer has now been created in Sun Systems. It may be that you need to feed back information from Sun Systems back to Salesforce. So ION can do that as well. So it may be, when a salesperson is looking in Salesforce, they want to know what the current outstanding invoices are on that account. It would be possible for ION to pick up that information and transfer that back into Salesforce. So it's two-way traffic effectively. And when we look at the demonstration later on, I think you'll see how easily that information can be transferred. And I think one of the terms that Infor certainly use a lot when talking about this is what they call loosely coupled integration. And what that really means is all of this information is being exchanged using XML files. And I think when Richard explains later, he'll talk a little bit about why it makes life easier by just using one particular type of integration. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So I'll pass this over to Richard now, and he will explain loosely coupled technology and then go on to the demonstration itself.
Thank you, Gary. Well, as Gary said, really, loosely coupled is not necessarily an Infor terminology. I guess it comes from the concept of SOA and service-oriented architecture. But the benefits really of having an piece of middleware or an integration technology that is in itself loosely coupled is the idea being that, contrary to possibly the way integrations have been rigidly developed in the past, something that's loosely coupled doesn't break when you upgrade one of the connected systems. You don't need to rewrite reports or localizations. It's quicker to integrate, and it actually, the implementation of the middleware itself, or the implementation of the integration platform, is something that with ION, Infor have sought to simplify, both in terms of the deployment and in terms of the way you manage, create integrations and workflows. So really, all of that has been taken outside. it's a generic integration framework, so a lot of the things that were previously buried within some of the ERP or other applications themselves have now been extracted and they're actually part of the ION infrastructure for integration. Okay, so just to sort of round off the presentation, or the slide presentation at least, so in practical terms, what are the components of the ION suite? Well, there are 4 main components, or there's 4 main server components, which are ION Connect, ION Workflow, ION Event Management, and ION Desk, and those are the 4 boxes you see at the bottom of this table here. So to summarize briefly, ION Connect is the integration technology, the methodology or the tools for connecting applications to each other. So these can be Infor applications connecting to each other. These could be Infor applications connecting to non-Infor applications, or it could be 2 non-Infor applications connecting to each other. So ION Connect is really the integration piece. It's the integration technology for connecting and transferring information between different systems. ION Workflow, as the name suggests, is the set of services that are used to design, automate document routing and approvals, again either across Infor applications or across and between Infor and non-Infor applications. So it doesn't have to be limited to Sun systems or other Infor applications. ION can work with any system. ION Event Management is a set of services that are proactively monitoring events that we design, again, within Infor systems or between Infor and non-Infor systems, so we're monitoring for certain events, and when those events occur, we wish to maybe send out proactively a task or an alert to an end user. Those tasks and alerts are visible to end users in the client layer at the top through what they call the ION Activity Deck. So the ION Activity Deck, beg your pardon, is really the end user interface for any alerts, workflow events that are being generated and pushed out to users or groups of users. And that activity deck, as we'll see, can be run inside the browser as a standalone tool, or it can be integrated within Infor Workspace if you're using, for example, Sun Systems inside Infor Workspace, the SharePoint deployment, and it can sit inside there. Finally, ION Desk. ION Desk, again, is browser-based, and ION Desk is really this sort of control center where we manage all of the design and the modeling of the workflow, the connections, the integrations, and the event management. So it's a browser-based interface, so everything to do with ION can be managed exclusively through a browser, and ION Desk is the user interface that an administrator or a power user would use to configure, design workflows, configure and monitor any ION services. Okay, so what we'll do is just take a look at some of the software, and I'll just run through from a user interface perspective how some of those components of the ION suite actually look in reality. So we'll just take a quick look at ION Desk, and I'll just walk you through at a high level some of the different areas within ION Desk. We'll take a look at the ION Activity Deck, and then finally we'll just show you how that Activity Deck can also run integrated within, for example, the Infor Workspace alongside some systems web client running inside the SharePoint portal. So as Gary said at the beginning, we're going to be drilling down on all of these components in a lot more detail in the subsequent sessions. The purpose of this session really is just to give you an overview and just to walk through some of the components at a high level, and we'll talk about them in general terms, and then in the more detailed webinars that are coming up, we'll go through and we'll actually put together some real-life examples and show you how all of those things work in practice. Okay, so I'll just switch across into the demo system, so just bear with me. So as I said, we're going to start off by just connecting to ION Desk. So as we said, ION Desk is really just the management interface for anything to do with ION, and as you can see, this is purely browser based, so this can be run in any browser, whether it's Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, so on. So within here we have, there's essentially the different ION components that we talked about, the main components of the suite being Connect, Event Management, and Workflow. And the purpose of ION Desk is either to allow us to work on any one of those elements, either from a design and modeling perspective, so to either design integrations with Connect, design event management, or to design some workflow, or alternatively to manage the status and to review integrations that may be up and running, review events and triggers, proactively monitor any workflow or troubleshoot any errors that may have occurred. So ION Desk is where we can do all of this as an administrator. So I'll just walk you through how some of this looks very quickly. In terms of ION Connect, you can see within the menus here we've just got a couple of options, for example, for defining our connection points. So a connection point is really a connection to a service or another application that's going to be used as part of an integration. Now you can see here we may have a connection for Sun Systems. We can also connect to other databases. We can connect to any bespoke systems we have inside our organization. We can also connect, as you can see here, to external web services. So in this case, this is a web service on the internet that provides weather information, but that could just as easily be an exchange rate service, an exchange rate feed from the European Central Bank to then feed exchange rates into our expense management or into our finance system. So we can build connection points, and once these connection points have been either built or installed out of the box, we can then use those as the basis for integrations within Connect. I won't go into too much detail in all of these, but the idea is, as you can see here, that all of these things can be managed simply from within a user interface. We can also use, for example, the Connect interface to define document flows within an integration. So if we were designing an integration between some systems and a file system, or if we were designing an integration maybe between some systems and the expense management system, then this is where we would define the connections between those applications and the types of documents that can maybe be exchanged between those systems. So you can see here it's really a graphical modeling tool to build an integration using a combination of out-of-the-box connectors and some other simple techniques, XML and XLST, to build those connections. So here we've just built a connection between the Sun Finance system and the expense management system, which in this case is maybe syncing some personnel information, so that when an employee record in the finance system gets created, that information can be pushed across into the expense management system, or maybe a remittance advice when as part of a payment run the employee expenses have been reimbursed. We can then synchronize that information back into the expense management system to update the status of the expense form to say that that has now been paid. With regards to event management, the concepts are essentially the same in terms of designing monitors that will maybe monitor for different events occurring within various applications. You can see here we've got a list of events, some of which are active, some of which are inactive. But for example, we may have, Gary mentioned earlier on, the case where a customer is created. We can have, as we can see here, an event within the system for the creation of a new customer record within Sun. So what this is doing is when somebody creates a new customer record within Sun Systems, whenever that condition evaluates to true, then we can essentially we can send out an alert that contains predefined message. It'll say a new customer, including the customer account number from Sun, and the customer name has been created, and it can push that message, which will be visible in the end user's activity deck. It can send that out to a group of Sun Systems users. We can also use the alerts, again, as Gary mentioned, to maybe trigger additional workflow. So as well as just sending out a status message to a group of people who are listening in, we can also send out an alert message, but maybe generate some additional workflow, something that needs to go for approval or some other process that needs to happen, some additional information that maybe needs to be fed back to another system. In the case of, again, another example maybe, we've got one here for the creation of an analysis code. This may be the creation of an analysis code that represents a new project. So when that analysis code gets created within a specific analysis dimension within Sun Systems, we can again send out an alert message to a group of users, but at the same time we can maybe generate some additional workflow, so somebody actually has to go in and approve the creation of that analysis code before it is definitively created within Sun Systems. So again, the idea is it's really a graphical interface or a relatively easy to use user interface to generate and create these monitors, which can then be used to generate alerts and event notifications to users within the system. Finally, with regards to the workflow, again, a very similar concept for the modeling of the workflow. We have, again, a number of different workflows configured here, and these can be very basic, or they can be complex. For example, we have here one that's going to generate some workflow around the payment process within Sun Systems. We have using the standard payment sets functionality from within Sun Systems. When somebody uses the payment run and the payment selection sets to select a set of transactions to be paid, we can send that set of payment preview transactions through a piece of workflow, of which there's maybe two choices. They get sent to a specific group of users, and there's two possibilities in this case. A very basic workflow, they can either approve the transactions that have been presented to them, or they can reject, and then depending on what's happened, we can determine what happens within the system. We can set the status on those transactions within the payment set to approve or to be rejected. We could have other ones as well. I mean, we could have all sorts of things, whether it's the purchase order approval authorization, it could be authorization on a Sun Systems journal, it could be authorization maybe on an account allocation process within Sun Systems. So when somebody sets a specific allocation marker on a range of accounts that represents a given status, we can fire off some workflow because maybe we don't actually want that allocation marker to be used except within in extenuating circumstances, so maybe somebody needs to approve that. We can have a journal as we have here that's sent for approval, and depending on the choices on whether it gets approved or not, it can either finally be posted or simply put back on hold and held within the staging area. So the idea is really that ION Desk is a web-based interface for managing all of the creation of your events, workflows, and integrations. Within here as well, we have, as I said, other functionality to track ongoing integrations, to track any things that are currently active, so we can see which workflows are currently active, any errors, any outstanding tasks, any things that have failed to integrate. We can manage that centrally from a single location within a browser using no special technology, using ION Desk. So from an end user perspective, we said that these alerts maybe, or workflow notifications, these can be presented to the user in a couple of different ways. One is through our ION activity deck, and I'll just switch across here. So we can run ION activity deck again as a standalone tool either on the desktop or within the browser. So we can see it here as a standalone tool running inside the browser. So again, if some of you are familiar with Twitter and the concept of creating lists or columns, again something like TweetDeck, where you can have different columns representing maybe different filtered views of different notifications, tasks, and alerts. We can have that within the ION activity deck, and you can see here if I was logged into this in real time, any alerts that are coming in, they would just really feed into this alerts feed in real time. We can have obviously drill backs within the notifications and alerts themselves. If I need to approve something as part of a workflow, typically there's going to be a link in there somewhere for me to maybe drill back into the core application itself to approve or maybe set a status flag. So activity deck is the end user interface where all of these different workflows, notifications and alerts are presented to the end users. If I was authorizing something as part of a piece of workflow, I don't think I have it here, but we could have, for example, a preview of the workflow underneath here. So if this was part of that journal authorization process, the system would actually show me graphically the workflow that I was actually interacting with at that point in time, so I could see exactly where I was in the workflow if I wanted to. So the activity deck, as I said, it can be run either as a standalone tool, or the other thing that we mentioned is if we're using Infor Workspace, which is the SharePoint portal for the SharePoint platform into which all of the different Infor applications can be integrated, whether that's the web version of Sun Systems or whether that's the expense management, purchase order and procurement system, whatever that may be. You can run obviously the web versions of those applications within the Workspace portal, but you can have at the same time, again, if there are any notifications, I can run the activity deck as a web part inside of my Workspace environment. So if I had any alerts, tasks, notifications that were outstanding, I can get those again as a feed in real time whilst I'm working inside of the main application. So I can have those feeds coming in via the web part on the right hand side. So that's really just a very quick overview of some of the components of the ION suite and what they look like, how they're implemented. If we just switch back to the slides quickly, just to finish off before we go into the Q&A. In terms of the knowledge spectrum or the complexity spectrum of the required skill sets to develop some of these things, I guess like anything, there's a wide range of things, workflow through to full-blown integrations. But the idea, certainly with regards to workflow and event management, is that these should be easy to manage. They're easily packaged. They're manageable by the end user or people who are application administrators within that application. As we progressively get across the complexity spectrum, maybe Infor to Infor application integration, again, that's relatively easy, but it may require typically some assistance, partner assistance, because in those cases, typically the Infor to Infor application integrations have out-of-the-box connectors for ION Connect, and it's simply a case of installing the relevant connectors and configuring them. If we're looking at connecting an Infor application to a non-Infor application, maybe Sun Systems to Salesforce, as Gary was talking about earlier on, again, that's another level of complexity, but the idea is by using standard technology, things like XML, XLST, again, that's something that can be configured by a consultant or by a partner organization. It's not really a development tool. And then finally, you may get onto the higher level of complexity, integrating two completely unrelated non-Infor applications, which again may be another skill set altogether, DBA skills, SQL scripting, a little bit of programming, so on and so forth. So the idea is that there's a whole range of things you can do with ION, and obviously they vary in complexity, but for the day-to-day management, certainly of workflow and events, the idea is that these can be packaged, they're easy to implement, and they can be managed by the end user. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we'll ask Emma to open up the telephone lines. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. You can send a chat message to Emma, and then Emma will go through the questions with us, and we'll try and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Richard. There are currently no questions.
Okay. Well, if there are any questions, or if you have any questions that come to mind after the session, then I'll leave our contact details on here for the next few minutes. So please feel free to get in touch with Emma, Gary, or myself. Our contact details are up there, and we'll be very happy to talk to you.
Richard, I've just, Kirsty at Euromoney has a question. I'm just going to let Kirsty speak now.
Okay, we have a question.
Please go ahead and speak, Kirsty, if you can. If not, oh, I think she's sent me the question now, Richard, 1 second. She would like to know, Richard, are any of our clients using ION with EBMS software?
With Eclipse, so the question I think was, are any of Eclipse's clients using ION currently with EBMS software? The answer is not yet, not that I'm aware of. But certainly that's one potential application for something like ION to, again, integrate any system really with EBMS or whatever it may be. But again, we'd need to have a look at that in a little bit more detail to understand exactly what it is that needs to be integrated and what options those other systems give us in terms of providing XML data.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, the other point to make on that is obviously this is a relatively new technology. It's only been out for about 12 months, so obviously still there's, I guess, a relatively low take-up, but that's certainly accelerating, we've seen in the last few months.
Kirsty says thank you. That's answered her question.
Yeah. Okay.
No other questions at the moment.
Okay, well, I don't think there's any more questions from what I can see. So, like I said, I'll leave the contact details up here on the screen. You're very welcome to get in touch with any of us at any time. Just give us a call, and we'll be very happy to talk to you about any queries you have regarding ION or indeed anything else. If there are no more questions, then I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.